What if genius isn't a gift, but a gear? What if intelligence isn't something you're born with, but something you build? What if immortality doesn't come from how long you live, but from what lives after you? And Albert Einstein cracked the code, not just of time and energy, but of the human mind and the universe around it. And deep within that brilliance was a pattern, a method, a hidden operating system that few noticed, and even fewer understood. A code that had nothing to do with formulas, but everything to do with frequency. And that code is not reserved for the elite. It's available to anyone willing to see beneath the surface. Because Einstein didn't walk through life in a straight line. He spiraled upward, thought deeper, and vibrated differently. Not because he had more neurons, but because he unlocked more of himself. And the code begins. With this, he questioned everything. Not just external facts, but internal programming. He questioned his habits, his reactions, his limits, his emotions, his own logic. Because he knew that truth is not found, it's uncovered. And to uncover it, you must dig. And digging into the mind means breaking past comfort and certainty and into raw awareness. And the first code Einstein lived by was disruption, the refusal to accept a thought just because it's repeated, the refusal to believe a rule just because it's written. And that disruption became his default state. And what if the thoughts you've accepted aren't yours, but inherited? And what if you're not stuck? You're just running a code you didn't write. And Einstein rewrote his code line by line, not overnight, but over years, through silence, through observation, through radical honesty. And the second layer of the code was imagination as a navigation system. Because while others mapped their lives through memory, he mapped his through vision. And the more he imagined, the more the universe revealed. Because the universe does not respond to logic, it responds to language. And imagination is the native tongue of creation. And Einstein spoke it fluently, and you can too. But only if you stop silencing your visions to fit the volume of your current reality. Because your reality is a lagging reflection of your dominant thoughts. And the next code Einstein embedded was non-conformity with precision, not rebellion for attention, but rebellion for alignment. He understood that if everyone is going one direction, the truth is probably in the opposite. And he walked away from school's ideas, paradigms that were polished but not powerful, and replaced them with thought experiments not bound by grades or approval, but by expansion. And expansion was his real obsession. He expanded thought, he expanded time, he expanded possibility, because he lived inside the next part of the code, emotional neutrality. He didn't get swept by panic or praise. He didn't live reactive, he lived responsive. And that allowed his brain to operate like a lab, not a battlefield. And your emotions are not your enemy. They are your indicators. And Einstein tracked them like data and transformed them like alchemy. And from that state, he created room for the final part of the first layer of the code, cosmic humility. The realization that even with all he knew, he was still a speck inside a mystery. And that mystery humbled him. And that humility magnetized miracles. Because humility isn't weakness, it's resonance. And when you resonate with truth, the truth reveals itself faster. And when Einstein said, "God does not play dice," he wasn't preaching, he was perceiving. He understood that the universe is intelligent, not random. And intelligence isn't about knowing more. It's about aligning deeper. And the more he aligned, the more he accessed. And access is everything, because what you can access, you can activate. And Einstein's mind was activated, not just by math, but by music, by solitude, by questions. And the right questions open portals. And your next breakthrough is not behind more knowledge, it's behind a better question. And the right question now might be, what code am I running? And is it mine? And if it's not, then what do I need to overwrite? And overwrite begins with awareness. And awareness starts when you stop numbing and start noticing. And Einstein noticed everything. He noticed patterns no one else saw, connections no one else made, because he wasn't trying to fit in. He was trying to figure it out. And in that figuring, he found his fingerprint. And that fingerprint left a mark that outlived his breath. And that is immortality, not in years, but in influence. And influence begins with integrity. And integrity means living as one whole thought, not fragments, not fake fronts, not fractured identities, but full force inner unity. And Einstein had that. And that unity gave him access to what we now call impossible, but to him was inevitable. Because inevitability is the child of inner work. And this is your inner work now. Not to become Einstein, but to activate your own code. To stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing to become the kind of thinker who bends time. Not because it's a trick, but because it's a tick, consequence of alignment. And alignment is the most powerful algorithm in the multiverse. And Einstein cracked it because he looked within more than he looked around. And when he said imagination is more important than knowledge, he wasn't giving advice. He was giving coordinates. And those coordinates are still active, still vibrating, waiting for you to tune in. Once you do, once you accept that your mind is not a cage but a command center, you'll begin to send new signals, and those signals will bend your world, and the old codes will crash, and the new ones will compile. And you'll become a force, not because you're louder, but because you're aligned. Go get it. What if focus wasn't discipline, but frequency? What if your ability to concentrate wasn't about force, but about tuning in? What if the greatest breakthroughs in human history didn't come from long hours, but from deep alignment? And Albert Einstein knew this. He didn't chase focus, he became it. He didn't wrestle his thoughts, he rearranged his vibration. And what if your distracted mind isn't broken, it's just misaligned? What if the reason you can't finish what you start isn't because you're lazy, but because you haven't tuned to the right mental channel? Because Einstein didn't multitask his genius, he funneled it. He created a mental ritual of presence, so pure, it pulled ideas from other dimensions. And that ritual wasn't complicated, it was intentional. It began with silence, because silence is not empty. It is the chamber where reality resets. And Einstein would walk for hours alone, not to escape, but to enter deeper. And while others needed noise to feel alive, he needed stillness to feel the signal. And that stillness gave him access to the second layer of his ritual, curiosity without conclusion. Because focus dies when it's forced to be final, and Einstein never focused to finish. He focused to follow. He followed the question, not for an answer, but for expansion. And in that expansion, the brain awakens parts you've been taught to ignore. And those parts are portals, not just to ideas, but to identity. Because focus is not just about what you do, it's about who you become. And Einstein became a vessel for vision because he honored the third layer of his ritual, time disobedience. He didn't obey the clock. He obeyed consciousness. He didn't live in time. He stretched it. And that stretch came from entering flow. And flow doesn't happen in stress. It happens in surrender. And Einstein surrendered to the process, not to pressure. And that surrender unlocked the fourth layer of his code, inner repetition. Because genius isn't found in doing more, it's found in doing deeper. And Einstein would return to the same ideas again and again, not because he didn't get them, but because they weren't finished revealing themselves. And revelation doesn't rush, it ripens. And you must return to your own questions, not with frustration, but fascination. Because the depth you ignore might hold the destiny you're chasing. And focus is how you mine that depth. And mining takes more than motivation. It takes devotion. And Einstein was devoted to his inner world in a way most people are devoted to distraction. And his fifth ritual was distraction, disconnection. Not escape, but deliberate elimination of anything that pulled his energy out of alignment. Because energy is everything, and scattered energy builds scattered lives, and focused energy builds legacy. And your energy follows your attention. And if your attention is being hijacked by noise and notifications, then your destiny is being diluted by design. And Einstein didn't let the world define his attention. He designed it himself, with sacred habits and sacred space. And you must do the same, not because it looks productive, but because it builds your mental sanctuary. And inside that sanctuary, new thoughts emerge. And those thoughts are electric. And electricity is life. And when you think deeply, you don't just create solutions. You create systems. You create structure. And Einstein's thinking became structure for the modern world, because he didn't just think about the world, he thought beyond it. And to think beyond, you must rise beyond. And rising beyond requires one more ritual: emotional clearing. Because emotions, left unchecked, will block focus at the root. And Einstein didn't ignore his emotions. He cleared them through music, through walking through surrender. And when your emotions flow, your focus sharpens, because the mind isn't a machine, it's a river. And when that river is polluted by repressed emotion, the current of thought gets clogged, and you drown in distraction. But when you clear the stream, the ideas flow fast and fearless. And that fearlessness is what made Einstein magnetic, not just to scientists, but to seekers, to thinkers, to revolutionaries. Because true focus is rare, and rare things become sacred, and sacred things build eternity. And you are not here to build a to-do list. You are here to build a temple of thought. And that temple begins with the frequency you tune into right now. And that frequency is shaped not by force, but by rhythm. And your new rhythm is this: enter silence, choose curiosity, stretch time, repeat the deep, clear the emotion, eliminate X, noise, honor the thought. And when you do, you don't just become focused, you become a frequency. And the universe doesn't respond to people, it responds to frequency. And once you are a match for focus, the answers rush in, the visions align, the path lights up, and everything changes. Not because the world slowed down, but because you did. And Einstein lived slow on the outside to move fast on the inside. And the faster you move inside, the more timeless you become. And timeless minds leave timely marks. And that's what legacy is. Not fame, but frequency encoded in time. Go get it. what if solitude wasn't a sign of loneliness, but a signal of leadership? What if being alone didn't mean you were lost, but that you were finally listening? What if the world has trained you to fear the very space where your genius is meant to awaken? Because Albert Einstein didn't run from isolation, he ran to it. And what he found there wasn't silence, but signal. Not emptiness, but elevation. Because when the noise fades, the soul speaks. And in those quiet hours, when no one was clapping, and no one was watching, and no one was validating, he found the universe whispering to him in frequencies most people are too busy to hear. And what if the thoughts you seek, the clarity you crave, the answers you chase, are not found in more effort, but in more stillness? Because thinking at the highest level requires energy that only solitude can provide. And Einstein guarded his solitude like treasure, because he knew what was born in that silence would echo forever. And it has. And now it's your turn to stop fearing your aloneness and start feeding from it. To stop filling the quiet with distractions and start letting the quiet fill you. Because the greatest architects of reality always retreat before they rise. They disappear before they disrupt. And Einstein knew that solitude wasn't a pause. It was a portal. And once you enter that portal, you start to remember things the world made you forget. You remember your rhythm, your voice, your questions, your power. Because solitude reveals what speed conceals. And the world is addicted to speed. But Einstein lived in space. Space between thoughts, space between actions, space between assumptions. And in that space, he built the future. Because solitude isn't just where you think, it's where you process, where you cleanse, where you recalibrate. And when you do that, you begin to create from the core, not from comparison. And creation without comparison is liberation. And Einstein was liberated because he no longer needed external mirrors. He had internal clarity. And clarity is born when the dust of the world settles. And that dust only settles when you sit still long enough to let it. And most people never do. They rush, they scroll, they stuff their lives with noise because they fear the quiet will reveal their chaos. But Einstein welcomed the chaos because he knew that within the chaos was the code. And to find the code, you must sit with the storm long enough for the lightning to strike. And that lightning is not destruction, it's insight, it's revelation, it's the truth you've been avoiding. And in solitude, truth finally shows its face because the masks drop, the roles fade, and what's left is real. And when you get real, you get powerful. Not performative powerful, but gravitational powerful, because presence becomes your atmosphere. And that presence is shaped by your private hours, not your public image. And Einstein didn't become magnetic through marketing. He became magnetic through meaning. And that meaning was found in moments no one ever saw. And those are the moments that matter. Not the awards or applause, but the hours you spend wrestling with the raw questions of who you are and why you're here and what wants to come through you. And that wrestle doesn't weaken you, it wires you. And every time you sit with the uncertainty, instead of fleeing from it, you train your mind to go deeper and deeper. Minds produce higher visions, and higher visions bend history. And Einstein bent history because he built a sanctuary within himself. And that sanctuary is available to anyone willing to stop outsourcing their peace and start cultivating it. And solitude is not a punishment, it's preparation. And if you've been feeling alone, maybe it's not because you're off track, but because you're being set apart. And what's being built in the dark is meant to shine brighter than anything created in the crowd. Because the crowd can't see your destiny. Only you can. And you see it best when the noise dies and the voices fade, and all that's left is the pulse of your own becoming. And Einstein followed that pulse, and it led him through confusion into clarity, through rejection into revelation, through solitude into immortality. And now it's your turn to go inward, not because it's safe, but because it's sacred. And the deeper you go, the higher you rise. Go get it. What if the greatest minds didn't have the most answers, but the deepest questions? What if genius wasn't found in facts, but in wonder? What if the key to reshaping reality isn't knowledge, but the curiosity that precedes it? Because Albert Einstein didn't start with certainty, he started with awe. And that awe became the engine that carried him beyond the walls of logic and into the dimensions of discovery. And while the world demanded conclusions, he kept falling in love with the question. Because to Einstein, wonder wasn't weakness, it was weaponry. And most people lose that weapon as they grow older. They trade imagination for instruction and trade soul for structure. But Einstein held on to the part of himself the world tried to bury. The part that still believed the universe was alive, that questions were portals, and that mystery wasn't something to solve, it was something to stand in. And you must do the same, because life isn't a riddle to be cracked, it's a canvas to be questioned. And those who rise are not those who know the most, but those who feel the most, who feel deeply enough to remain curious in a world addicted to answers. And Einstein let that curiosity guide his entire life, not just his science, but his relationships, his habits, his philosophy. And he woke up each day not asking, "What do I need to finish?" but "What do I need to follow?" And he followed the energy, not the expectations. And that's how the mirror opened. And the mirror wasn't made of glass. It was made of awareness. And when you look into that mirror, you don't see reflection. You see revelation. And that revelation shows you what's possible, not just in the external world, but in your own being. And Einstein knew the most unexplored terrain wasn't the universe, it was the human mind. And inside that mind were universes of potential waiting to be remembered. Because nothing is truly new, it is remembered. And remembering requires presence. And presence is powered by wonder. And when you wonder, you widen. And when you widen, you break patterns. And when you break patterns, you become unpredictable. And when you become unpredictable, you become unstoppable. And Einstein was unstoppable, not because he had a perfect plan, but because he had a relentless permission to question reality as it was given to him. And that permission is what you need now to stop accepting limits dressed as logic and start asking questions that make your cells tremble, because those questions carry the voltage of your next version. And that power wasn't in numbers, it was in knowing that numbers are symbols, and symbols are vibrations, and vibrations are messages, and like a detective of divinity piecing together a universe that responds to thought. And what if your thoughts right now are already creating ripples in fields you can't see? What if your deepest wonder is already writing the script of your future? Because wonder writes with fire. It carves doors into walls. It opens pathways into patterns. And those patterns lead you to people and places and ideas you could never plan. And Einstein never planned to be great. He planned to be real. And realness is the raw energy of wonder. And when you become raw again, not rehearsed, not robotic, but real, your energy starts to glow. And that glow makes you magnetic. And that magnetism makes the impossible inevitable. Because you're no longer chasing reality. You're co-creating it. And Einstein didn't chase science. He danced with it. He let his childlike awe become the compass, and that compass never led him astray. And now it's your turn to pick up the bag. Compass of curiosity, and ask not, how can I succeed? But what mystery is calling me? What beauty am I blind to? What law of the universe am I carrying inside my soul, waiting to be reawakened? Because you weren't made to memorize facts. You were made to birth frameworks. And frameworks come not from force, but from flow. And flow comes not from structure, but from surrender. And surrender doesn't mean give up. It means give in to the rhythm of something higher than fear and deeper than doubt. And that depth is where Einstein lived. And that's where you must live too, in the mirror of mystery, where the unknown isn't your enemy, it's your invitation. Go get it. What if light wasn't just a physical force, but a spiritual frequency? What if moving faster didn't mean rushing forward, but rising upward? What if the speed of clarity of your mind and the purity of your energy, because Albert Einstein didn't just study light, he became one with it. He didn't chase insight, he tuned our. Success is directly tied to the clarity of your mind and the purity of your energy. Because Albert Einstein didn't just study light, he became one with it. He didn't chase insight, he tuned into it. And when he said the speed of light is the universal constant, he wasn't just teaching physics. He was giving you a pattern, a principle, a law hidden inside the science. And that law is this: move at the speed of clarity, think at the speed of intuition, act at the speed of alignment. Because when your thoughts are clear, your path accelerates. When your energy is clean, your vision sharpens. And when your intention is pure, the impossible starts folding toward you. And Einstein didn't get lucky, he got light. And that light came not from knowledge, but from knowing. And knowing is not in the mind, it's in the soul. And when the soul lights up, the mind follows, and the body follows, and the world responds. And you don't need to force life anymore. You just need to match its frequency. And the frequency of light is truth. And Einstein walked in truth. Truth, not popular truth, but personal truth. And that made him faster, not in movement, but in manifestation. Because he didn't waste time pretending. He didn't lose power explaining, and he didn't trade his light for approval. And you must stop doing that too, because every time you dim your light to be accepted, you disconnect from the law. And the law only serves those who are aligned with it. And alignment begins with integrity, not moral perfection, but energetic honesty. And Einstein was honest with himself about what he loved, about what mattered, about what questions. Lit his fire, and he followed that fire into formulas. And the formulas followed him into forever. And you don't need to be a physicist to access this law. You just need to live as light. And that means dropping the weights that dim your speed, the stories that slow you down, the beliefs that bend your energy. And Einstein didn't let the gravity of society keep him grounded. He let the gravity of truth pull him into orbit. And in that orbit, time changed. Thought changed, everything changed. And you can change everything too. Not by trying harder, but by thinking brighter. And the brighter you think, the faster you move. Not in chaos, but in coherence. Because the universe doesn't reward force, it responds to flow. And flow isn't something you find, it's something you generate. And it's generated when you stop acting out of fear and start moving from fire. And Einstein's fire came from his fascination, and his fascination created momentum. And momentum turned to magic, and that magic became math. And that math became motion, and that motion became immortality. Because light never dies, it just travels. And your ideas, your energy, your presence, they're all forms of light. And when you live fully, you don't just make moves, you make waves. And those waves echo in minds you'll never meet, and hearts you'll never see. And Einstein knew this. He knew his work wasn't just about science. It was about awakening. And awakening travels faster than anything. And if you've ever felt slow, stuck behind in life, maybe it's not because you're broken. Maybe it's because you're dim, and the light is still inside you. It just needs your permission. And that permission won't come from the world. It has to come from within. Because only you can choose to move at the speed of truth. Only you can drop the mask and reveal the mission. Only you can stop trading brilliance for belonging and step into the beam of your own becoming. And once you do, you'll notice something strange. Time starts to shift. Resistance fades. Things find you before you even wait. Reach for them. And people will ask how, and you'll smile because you'll know it's not a trick, it's a law. The law of light. And Einstein didn't invent it, he embodied it. And now it's your turn to do the same. Not just to shine, but to move as the light you are. Go get it. What if genius wasn't about seeing more, but about seeing deeper? What if intelligence wasn't measured by information, but by interpretation? What if your future doesn't depend on how much you know, but on how well you notice? Because Albert Einstein didn't see what others couldn't, he saw what others wouldn't. He didn't look for answers, he looked for patterns. And those patterns became portals to power and progress. And while the world trained people to memorize, Einstein trained himself to recognize. And recognition is the seed of genius. Because when you can see beneath the surface, you gain access to a different level of life. And this wasn't magic, it was a mindset, a mental pattern built through intention. And the first layer of that pattern was observation, not casual glances, but conscious attention. Because everything is communicating all the time. And Einstein knew the universe speaks in symbols, in frequencies, in feelings, in feedback. And the more you train your awareness, the more those signals become obvious. And once they're obvious, they become usable. And that's what Einstein did. He used the hidden data, the background noise, the subtle shifts in energy, the inconsistencies in assumptions. And where others saw confusion, he saw clues. And those clues formed constellations of meaning. And those constellations became concepts. And those concepts became revolutions. Because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more noticing. And Einstein noticed what others ignored, not because he had more time, but because he gave more presence. And presence is power, because presence gives you access to invisible threads, the ones connecting your thoughts, your reality, your destiny. And those threads are braided into patterns. And when you learn to follow the pattern instead of forcing the outcome, your life accelerates. And Einstein lived inside patterns of thought. And every day he would map his mind, not through lists, but through loops, through rhythms, through revisions, because he revisited his thoughts until they unfolded their secrets. And most people get bored before brilliance. And Einstein stayed long enough for the truth to rise, because truth always rises. It just requires patience and pattern recognition. And to recognize the pattern, you must detach from the product and immerse in the process. And Einstein loved the process, the way a sculptor loves the stone. Because in the process, the soul speaks. And when the soul speaks, the genius listens. And genius isn't a gift, it's a gear. And gears turn when the pattern clicks. And the pattern clicks when attention deepens. And attention deepens when distractions die. And distractions only die when you choose purpose over pressure. Einstein chose purpose every time he ignored noise. Every time he rejected false urgency. Every time he let go of validation and entered vibration. And that vibration became vision. And vision became voice. And that voice still echoes because patterns don't die. They evolve. And the pattern of genius is evolution in motion. And if your life feels stuck, maybe it's because you're staring at the surface instead of seeking the structure beneath it. And beneath every frustration is a frequency trying to show you where your energy is misaligned. And beneath every doubt is a doorway. And beneath every failure is a formula. And Einstein lived from that level. And you can too, because your brain is pattern-seeking. It just needs permission and precision. And precision means cutting away everything that doesn't align. And Einstein cut deep. He cut shallow praise. He cut surface logic. He cut cheap certainty. And in the cutting, he found clarity, and clarity revealed the structure. And the structure revealed the pattern. And the pattern revealed the code. And the code revealed the truth. And the truth revealed the next dimension of thought. And that's how you level up. Not by copying others, but by decoding your own reality. And that reality becomes bendable when you stop being reactive and start being recursive. Recursive thinking means looping back to dig deeper, and Einstein looped back again and again until he found the anomaly, the crack, the moment the myth collapsed and the miracle emerged. And miracles are not magical, they are mathematical. They happen when meaning aligns with mastery, and mastery is built through pattern and repetition and attention. And Einstein mastered that loop, and you must too. Because once you see the pattern, you can predict the pulse. And once you predict the pulse, you can shift the path. And once you shift the path, you break the simulation. And once you break the simulation, you build your own. And that's what Einstein did. He built his own, and the world called it genius. But he called it seeing. Go get it. What if belief isn't just an opinion, but a gravitational force? What if the thoughts you believe aren't just passive? They're architects, and every belief you hold is a blueprint, silently shaping the structure. Einstein broke those walls, not with rage, but with reprogramming. And he knew something most people never understand. Your belief system is not sacred. It's scripted. And if it's scripted, it can be rewritten. And that's what he did. He rewrote the way he thought about God, about time, about self, about the universe, about failure, about destiny. And every rewrite bent his reality a little more. Because reality isn't static, it's reactive. And it reacts to the signal of belief. And belief is not loud, it's deep. And the deeper it roots, the further it reaches. And Einstein rooted his faith not in systems, but in wonder. Not in tradition, but in truth. And truth to him was alive and always expanding. And expansion became his religion. And what if you stopped worshiping fear and started following expansion? What if your future depends not on how smart you are, but on how sacred your beliefs have become? Because Einstein's genius wasn't just mental, it was spiritual. and his mind moved because his spirit did, and your feet. Spirit is the first thing to be caged by lies, and the last thing to be freed by truth. And freeing it takes faith. Not blind faith, but bold faith. The kind that says, I will believe in what I cannot see until what I cannot see becomes what I live inside. And Einstein lived in that place, not just in thought, but in trust. And trust is what turns possibility into probability. Because the mind doesn't move toward what it doubts, it moves toward what it accepts. And Einstein accepted that he was allowed to reshape thought, to stretch space, to question everything, and that radical. Permission unlocked radical perception, and he perceived things before the world believed they were real, and he believed things before the world could perceive they were possible. And that's the loop. Belief feeds perception, shapes experience, experience becomes evidence, and evidence reinforces belief. And if you're trapped in a loop of limitations, it's not because reality is cruel. It's because your belief has been hijacked by fear, and Einstein never let fear close his circuit. And you can't either. You must reopen the wires. You must re-electrify your belief. You must declare, I am no longer worshiping weakness. I am no longer defending doubt. I am no longer protecting false narratives that keep me small. And when you do, the energy shifts. And when the energy shifts, the field bends. And when the field bends, life rearranges around your new center of gravity. And that center is forged in faith. And Einstein's gravity came from his inner commitment to never stop believing in the mystery. And when you stop needing proof, you create it. And when you stop needing approval, you magnetize it. And when you stop needing permission, you become the authority. And Einstein became that authority, not through dominance, but through devotion. And his devotion was to discovery. And discovery only happens when belief makes space for it. And your beliefs right now are either walls or windows. And Einstein kept turning walls into windows, and then walked through them, and so can you. Because you're not locked in the room of your current beliefs. You're just sitting in the dark, waiting for the courage to turn on the light. And belief is that light. And once it's on, you begin to see the next level. Not outside you, but inside you. And once you believe it, you start to build it. And once you build it, the world bends with you. Go get it. What if the universe wasn't silent, but speaking? What if every moment wasn't random, but a message? What if reality itself is a language, and most people just never learned how to listen? And Albert Einstein did. He listened not with his ears, but with his soul. Not with analysis, but with awareness. Because logic can only take you so far. And Einstein knew the edge of genius begins where logic ends, and language begins. Not the language of humans, but the code of creation. The rhythm, the signal, the vibration beneath it all. And while others argued over facts, Einstein danced with frequencies, and he heard what they missed. Because he wasn't trying to be right, he was trying to resonate. And resonance is recognition. It's when something outside you matches something inside you. And that match is where truth lives. Not in textbooks, but in tension. Not in structure, but in silence. And Einstein spent more time in silence than most people spend in thought. Because in silence, the signal strengthens, and you begin to hear the codes that shape consciousness. And Einstein didn't discover equations. He remembered them from somewhere deeper, remembered them from a field of time. Knowing that doesn't speak in words, but in waves. And every great insight he had came not from analysis, but from alignment. And alignment means your mind and your intuition are moving in the same direction, and that direction is inward, not outward. And Einstein followed it through walks, through music, through moments of sudden knowing. And every time he listened, the universe spoke louder. And what if? The reason you feel lost is because you've been trying to find answers using the wrong language. What if the question is not, what do I do, but what do I feel when I stop doing? And in that stillness, your deepest knowing begins to rise. And Einstein trusted that knowing, even when it made no sense to others, especially then. And he didn't need consensus to validate his truth, because he had something stronger than proof. He had presence. And presence is the portal. And when you become fully present, the world begins to whisper things you've forgotten how to hear. And those whispers become symbols. And those symbols become signs. And those signs become structures. And those structures form new thoughts. And new thoughts form new futures. Einstein walked into that future every time he closed his eyes and listened. And the greatest minds in history all had this in common. They knew that thought is not the source, it's dot, the receiver, and your mind is not a container, it's an antenna. And your antenna is always picking up something. The question is, what frequency are you tuned to? Are you hearing fear, or are you hearing faith? Are you hearing noise, or are you hearing direction? And if it's noise, then your alignment is off. And if it's direction, then your destiny is near. And Einstein heard his destiny in the silence. And that destiny spoke in images, in metaphors, in mathematics that moved like music. And he followed it, not to be famous, but to be faithful. And faithfulness means staying close to the voice that calls you, even when no one else can hear it. And Einstein stayed close to that voice. And that voice took him beyond what could be measured and into what could be made. And he made from spirit, not just science. And that spirit didn't live in numbers. It lived in nuance and noticing, in neural sparks that don't announce themselves but unlock themselves. And you felt them too, in dreams, in flashes, in moments you couldn't explain but couldn't deny. And those moments are not madness. They are messages. And Einstein didn't dismiss them. He decoded them. And every time he did, his world changed, and so did ours. And if you want your world to change, you must learn to listen again. Listen beyond opinion, beyond logic, beyond what's trending, and into what's timeless. Because the timeless is always speaking, and it waits for no one. And rewards the ones who wait in stillness. And in that stillness, Einstein found equations that redefined existence. And you can find answers too, not out there, but within. And once you learn the language of the universe, you stop chasing, you start choosing, and life begins to respond. Not because you've learned more, but because you've tuned in. Go get it. What if destiny wasn't fixed, but fluid? What if the timeline of your life wasn't written in stone, but sculpted in thought? What if time itself wasn't moving through you, but responding to you? And Albert Einstein knew this. He didn't just theorize relativity, he lived it. He understood that time bends, space bends, and so does self. And when you shift the inner self, you shift the outer world. And Einstein didn't race time, he redefined it. Because he realized time is not a clock, it's a canvas. And most people paint with panic, rushing to be something before they've even set their goals. Remembered who they are, but Einstein painted with presence, and presence changes time. It stretches, it expands, it elevates. And when you're present, deeply present. You no longer chase your future, you call it. And what if your future is already waiting, just beyond the veil of your belief system? And what if you're not late? You're just out of sync. And Einstein spent his life syncing his thoughts, not with deadlines, but with design, with a divine architecture that only becomes visible when you stop reacting and start realizing. And realization is the true birth of genius. It's the moment you remember that time does not pass you, it obeys you. And obedience doesn't come from force, it comes from frequency. And Einstein's frequency was precise, not because he controlled everything, but because he let go of everything that didn't resonate with his highest rhythm. And rhythm is the real calendar. Rhythm is how destiny keeps time. And you don't miss your moment when you're in rhythm. And Einstein found his rhythm in curiosity, in stillness, in imagination. And those were not just qualities. They rushed to results. He relaxed into resonance. Because he knew speed doesn't equal success. Alignment does. And alignment is how you arrive before the world even knows where you're going. And he arrived early to the future, again and again, not through planning or clocks. They measured his becoming, and when others rushed to results, he relaxed into resonance because he knew speed doesn't equal success, alignment does. And alignment is how you arrive before the world even knows where you're going. And he arrived early to the future again and again, not through planning, but through perception. And perception is elastic. When you stretch it through belief, when you bend it through vision, when you mold it through truth. And Einstein bent perception until he could see through the walls others called reality. And what if your current reality is just an outdated perception running on someone else's time? And what if time isn't linear, but layered? And what if the future version of you is already real, just waiting for the now version of you to catch the signal? And Einstein caught signals from realms the world hadn't named yet. And those signals weren't random. They were invitations. And every time he accepted one, he stepped into another level of genius and another layer of his destiny. And you can do the same, because your life is not a line, it's a field. And in that field, everything is possible if you can feel it first. And Einstein felt the future before he defined it, and the universe responded, because the universe doesn't wait for credentials, it waits for coherence. And coherence means every part of you is moving in one direction, and that direction must be internal before it becomes external. And Einstein aligned the inner first, and time moved to meet him, and so did ideas, and so did opportunity. That's what true time travel is. Not teleporting through space, but transcending limitation from the inside out. And you are not late. You are just early in disguise. And Einstein proved that being early means seeing what others can't yet imagine, and building it before they believe it's possible. And belief collapses time, because it creates momentum, and momentum collapses delay, because it activates destiny. And destiny is not a finish line, it's a frequency. And you match that frequency not by chasing clocks, but by creating coherence. And coherence starts with clarity, and clarity begins when you stop asking what's next and start asking what's real. And the realest thing in you is timeless. And that timeless thing is what you're here to unleash. Go get it. What if thought never dies? What if every idea carries a ripple? What if your mind is not just a tool, but a transmitter, a temple, a transformer of reality? And Albert Einstein knew this. He didn't just study equations, he became one. He became the formula. He became the field. Because at a certain level of thought, thinking itself becomes creation. And most people stop thinking too soon. They stop at the surface. They stop when it's hard. They stop when it's unfamiliar. Einstein went past the wall, past the limits, past the logic, and he entered the zone where ideas become eternal. And he stayed there long enough to merge with the message. And what if that's the secret? Not to have thoughts, but to become them. To embody the vision so fully that your life becomes a living equation. And Einstein's equation wasn't just E equals mc squared. It was this: imagination plus integrity plus inquiry equals immortality, because your imagination writes the vision, your integrity protects the frequency, and your inquiry expands the path. And when all three align, you don't just live history, you write it. And Einstein wrote with light, with silence, with intuition, with vibrations he couldn't explain, but deeply trusted. And that trust turned him timeless. And you must learn to trust that deeply too. Because genius is not inherited, it's remembered. And remembering means returning. Returning to the version of you that existed before fear, before doubt, before delay. And Einstein lived from that version. And the world called him brilliant, but he was just real. And realness is rare, and rare becomes revered, and revered becomes remembered, and remembered becomes immortal. And Einstein became immortal, not by building fame, but by building frameworks. Not by chasing attention, but by channeling awareness. Not by following systems, but by feeling signals. And those signals spoke in frequencies most people can't hear because they're too busy proving. Einstein didn't prove, he pulled. He pulled ideas from realms we now call theory, but he called truth. And that truth lives in all of us, if we dare to dig deep enough, to believe big enough, and to burn long enough. Because it takes fire to illuminate thought, and it takes love to sustain it. And Einstein loved thinking, loved exploring, loved getting lost in questions with no maps. And from that chaos came the cosmos of his genius. And the cosmos didn't reward him with clarity. It tested him with contradiction. And he passed the test not by conquering it, but by dancing with it. And you must dance with your own contradiction too, because inside it is your code, your curve combusted again and again. And from those inner explosions came revolutions, and those revolutions outlived him. Because when you think from the soul never dies. And your thoughts are alive, your questions are alive, your ideas are alive. And once you speak them, the world starts to shift. Not because you yelled loud, but because you spoke true. And truth has its own gravity. It pulls people into your orbit. It anchors purpose. It attracts legacy. And Einstein never asked for legacy. He lived it. And living legacy means showing up every day with one question. What is the next impossible thing I'm willing to believe into being? And then following that thread with all your mind, all your emotion, all your attention, until reality bends and the door opens and the world watches in awe. And Einstein's life was that door. And now it's your turn to open it. To go from thinker to transmitter to time bender equation, and the equation you live will be the energy you leave. And the energy you leave will be the future someone else lives inside. And that is immortality. Not being remembered, but being repeated in the rise of others who needed your light to see their path. And if you rise now, you light a path that breaks chains and opens portals and births galaxies. And Einstein never stopped rising, and now neither can you, because the equation is written and the answer is clear. You are the formula. Go get it.